We're ready. I'd like to call this meeting of Lancaster County Council to order on October the 24th, 2022. I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight as we do our county business. I'd like to give a special shout out to our young Marine PFC Roslyn as he will be leading us in our Pledge of Allegiance here in a few minutes. We thank you for coming today. So let's get started, and we will have our pledge led by young Marine PFC Roslyn. Mr. Roslyn.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Thank you, Lord, for another blessed day. Please give us open minds and wisdom as council to make the best decisions for Lancaster County. Bless each council member here and everyone who's come in tonight. And have a safe trip home. In Jesus' name, pray, amen.
Amen. Let's move down to our approval of our agenda. I have a motion.
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Honeycutt, second for Mr. McGriff. Let's have a roll call, please.
Terry Graham,
Approve.
Charlene McGriff. Approve. Billy Mosteller.
Approved.
Larry Honeycutt.
Approved.
Steve Harper.
Approve.
Alan Blackman.
Approve.
Brian Carnes.
Approve.
All right, let's, we have a couple of special presentations tonight. The first one will be a proclamation for Red Ribbon Week for the Mecklenburg County Young Marines, presented by Council Member Billy Mosteller.
Guys, this husband and I attend the same church, family and I,
Let's move on down to, oh, okay, come on.
Hello, I am Young Marine PFC Rollison of the Mecklenburg County Young Marines. Young Marines is a youth education and service program of the Marine Corps League that promotes a drug-free and healthy lifestyle. Young Marines also teach our core values: teamwork, leadership, and discipline, and how to be a good citizen. From October 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2021, my Young Marine unit has conducted 540 hours of drug demand reduction training and 790 hours of community service. Today, I want to talk to you about Red Ribbon Week. Every year during the last week of October, the Drug Enforcement Agency celebrates Red Ribbon Week to honor Agent Cameron and to bring awareness about the dangers of illegal drug use and sales. This is done in honor of Special Agent Enrique Cameron, who was an 11 veteran of the DEA assigned in Mexico, where he was on the trail of the country's biggest marijuana and cocaine traffickers. In 1985, he was extremely close to unlocking a multi-billion-dollar drug pipeline. On February 7, 1985, he was killed by Mexican drug traffickers. His tragic death opened the eyes of many Americans to the dangers of drugs and the international scope of drug trafficking. Using illegal drugs are dangerous to your health, well-being, and those around you. Do not take any drugs that are prescribed by that are not prescribed by a doctor or given you by your parents. Do not carry or hold drugs for anyone that do not belong to you. Do you know if illegal drugs or drugs that don't belong to you, that you can wind up in serious trouble? Join me in being drug-free. Thank you, and Semper Fi.
All right. Again, we thank you, and this country needs a lot more young men like you. You set a great example.
Mr. Chairman, to piggyback on that, the DEA, as you talked about for Red Ribbon Week, the Lancaster County government is supporting a program with other area law enforcement called the National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day. So we are inviting community members this Saturday, October 29th, to come to the County Administration Building parking lot at 101 North Main Street from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. to bring in any expired or unused prescription drugs. It's part of the same campaign.
Let's move down to our second special presentation. Our airport construction update and 5-year capital improvement plan, CIP, presented by Ken Holt Consulting. Mr. Holt.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as he comes to the podium with Mr. Paul Moses, our airport director, want to highlight, generally every year we come together before council to outline the 5-year CIP that Ken will highlight as required for FAA. A lot of it is a plan. It doesn't have action required with it because some of the funding structures can change. But the excitement for y'all as you've advanced through your budget this year to do the terminal and lighting vault projects. Ken will give us an update on that and highlight when we can see some dirt turning, but also talk about some more funding application that we're focused on to try to get some more federal support for the terminal project. So I'll turn it over to Ken to highlight where we're at.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. What you're seeing on your screen up there, or maybe in front of me right here, is based on a debrief that we had requested of the FAA after we found out that we were unsuccessful in our pursuit of that airport terminal program funding, which was 95%. So we were fully intending to pursue it again. So we wanted to learn from them to see how we could have done it differently. So what really surprised both Paul and myself is we thought we were going to be meeting with one person at the Atlanta Airports District Office, and it ended up there were 6 FAA people there, 2 from Southern Region. So the Atlanta ADO reports to Southern Region. Within the Southern Region, we had the lady there that is on what is called the Committee of Nine. So these 9 people make the decisions every year as to who is going to get a grant, this ATP grant. So that was very important to have her there. But then in the Atlanta ADO, we had the manager of the Atlanta ADO, the senior planner, your program manager, your planner, and it was just really an hour's worth. It was well worth our time, and we really appreciated them spending that time with us. So the input we basically received is the form that we filled out for federal fiscal 2022 funding is at 5,100-144. We completed it correctly. We went over the entire form. They put it up on the screen. We went item by item to make sure that we filled it out correctly, and then to get their input on how we responded to their 8 criteria. And basically what they told us was that our responses were perfect. They wouldn't suggest any changes whatsoever. One of the other things that we discovered in that meeting, we weren't sure what happened when we submit that form. Where does it go? Because it goes to DC, but what is the process? And what we learned was that they rely on the Atlanta Airports District Office for more specific information because they keep those responses so short. That was some good information to have. So we will be coordinating with them very closely as for this next round that we're going for. And basically they said that our form or our project was given strong consideration, that they just ran out of money. So they're budgeted, or they're by law required to fund $1 billion a year to this program, and there are over 3,000 airports in the United States that are eligible for FAA funding, and there were 600 applications submitted. So the first year's program was very oversubscribed. So they ran out of funding, but one of the things that we learned that it was good and bad news. We have reported to you, and this was what they reported to us when the program was first rolled out, is that we could really go after this funding year after year. Didn't matter whether you had constructed a project or not. So we thought we had, since the law's 5 years, that we had 5 bites at the apple, and they had legal review of that policy and determined that it was illegal. So instead of it being that what they were telling us before, as long as we had not constructed anything prior to the enactment of the law, which was November the 15th, 2021, it was all eligible for reimbursement. That is not the case according to their legal review. It is anything that you have not accomplished after you sign a grant agreement. So let me take you through the process, which are the next steps up there. So the 5,100-144 form, it was due today, or it is due today at 5 o'clock. Paul Moses populated that form, executed that form, and submitted it this past Friday, so we got it to him early. So where do we go from here? Well, we're going to stay in close contact with the Atlanta ADO. As I mentioned, they are providing input to DC, to this, what they call is the bill implementation team. So we'll stay in close contact with them about this project. So sometime around February or March, we should know. In other words, they're going to let us know either we were successful or we weren't. So we're counting on being successful. And so we're showing up there. What we can expect is around mid-March that we would receive a grant agreement and have that executed right away. And once that happens, then we would issue a notice to proceed to the contractor. So once we learn this information about any Any work done prior to an executed grant agreement was not eligible for reimbursement. We started working with the contractor to see if we could delay the start date. So we're in that process right now. We had the debrief October the 4th, so for the past 3 weeks, we've been having weekly calls with the contractor so he could get with his subcontractors to make sure that we can delay the start without incurring additional cost. Any questions before I move to the next slide?
Well, I've got a concern that if you delay, what are the odds of actually being chose in the second round? You said they had, what, 600 applications, and how many of those did they accept? Do we know?
Yes, they had, they awarded grants to 85 airports. A couple of airports got more than one grant. So there were a total of 91 grants written last year.
I'm just concerned about delaying anything with cost. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Did you get any response back from the contractors on the delay yet? Do you get a sense of positive feedback or negative?
So far, it sounded positive. It may be of benefit for the delay.
Well, Mr. Holt, can you also clarify that we do have the lighting vault work that will also be going on during this time period? So we do have other work that will be going on. And then if you'll highlight the application amount that it would be worth the delay if we are able to get nearly $3 million for this project.
That's right. It's about $3.3 million is what we're requesting. Yes, sir.
If we had Representative Norman or our two senators involved in helping us out, I saw on TV where some small town in Wisconsin, about 7,000 people, they're going to spend $20 million to heat a sidewalk. It seems like they could do that. Maybe that our senators and our good member of the House could help us maybe on this path that we're on here.
I think that's an excellent idea. Now, I talked to the FAA about that last year. They typically frown on politics being played, and we typically discourage that, but this is a whole new game here. And so what they said was, let's see what it looks like after the 2022 process is complete. So if there's anybody that has close relations with Mr. Norman or either one of our senators, that cannot hurt. I do not think. I would encourage it.
Who was the successful applicants and why were they successful?
I've got a list I can get to you. So what I did was I highlighted a project just like this project. Everything that they showed as to how this project would benefit the community, we had it in our form. It was a new general aviation airport terminal building. It was their old terminal building was 47 years old. All this is in this spreadsheet, which I'll be glad to send to y'all.
That'd be interesting to see that.
It was 47 years old. Ours was 44. So basically, it's aged infrastructure. The only difference was their request was about 1/3 of our request.
So Ken, how many from South Carolina was awarded?
None.
None. Okay.
So I created a map to try to figure out where it was it politics that was being played here, and I couldn't really draw any real conclusion about that with this map. But I did ask them in the meeting, I said, if I noticed that there were 8 states that did not receive any of this funding, and honestly, I don't care about 7 of them, but I do care about 1, and that's South Carolina. So
Do you know
What
how many
happened?
from South Carolina applied?
I think they did apply, and they don't tell us who
Who
applied,
applied?
but they tell us who received.
Received, yeah.
But I would imagine that that other airports in South Carolina applied. The only other thing I would say is to have those 6 people there in that meeting with us and to show the interest to ask for that debrief, I would like to think that, well, it was just before Paul submitted the 5100-144 form, and I'd like to think that this is more on the forefront of their minds than maybe others. Because I did point that out to them about this airport in Alabama. It was just like ours, all the same benefits. The age was about the same. So, like I said, in the response to that lady on the committee of 9, she said, your project received strong consideration. So the only other thing I told them was they are required by law to spend $1 billion a year for 5 years for this program. And they divided that up budget-wise by the 8 FAA regions equally. So I suggested to them to consider a more equitable distribution would be to take their nationwide system plan, which has the 3,300 airports that are eligible for FAA funding, and look at how many are in the southern region. So there are about 600 in the southern region, and I told them, I said, that's 18%. So if you had 18% of $1 billion, be 180 million, and you only funded 145. If we had that additional 35 million, you could have done this project. So I don't know what's going to happen. We learned a lot, and we promoted the project, and now we have submitted again. So we'll hopefully know something very positive in February or March.
Mr. Chairman, could we have our attorney?
Gotta have your light on. Push it down. There you go.
Mr. Chairman, could we get our attorney to draft us a letter from this council that those of us who support this project would sign and send it to our great Representative Norman, our great senators of the state of South Carolina, and ask them to assist us in getting this thing off the floor and get it done. If all these things that are being done throughout the country that are not beneficial to anybody, in my opinion, this is beneficial to Lancaster County, and I think it would be a good deal if we could get that done.
We'll do it this week.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Mr. Hall.
Okay, so the next slide is up there. I thought it would be good to get sort of a general feel for where the different components are within the overall project. The overall project being the terminal building and the lighting vault. As Mr. Marstall said, the lighting vault is being funded, and I'm going to take you through a funding breakdown in just a second. It's being funded with different money. So we have 90% funding on the lighting vault and the generator, the emergency generator. So we can move forward with that, and that's what I talked with the contractor about. If it would help them, they want to move forward with that, then there's no problem. And if it's going to increase costs for them to not to move forward on the terminal, then they need to tell me what is that amount, just to order of magnitude, so I can then let Mr. Marstall know what do we want to do. Do we want to delay this? But it's hard for them to estimate what's going to happen. But the prime contractor is basically telling me that he thinks it might benefit them from cost. But you have the terminal building and the associated site work shown with the blue dots around. That's sort of a boundary of that work. The lighting vault and generator are shown in that green area there. And then the red these are improvements that are ancillary to the terminal building, although a part of the overall project. So how does that funding break down? The terminal building and site work is $3.5 million. That number, all these numbers under total project cost include not only the bid amount, but the construction phase services amount, all eligible for FAA funding. The lighting vault is $500,000. The emergency generator for the airfield is $52,000. The part of the emergency generator for the land side is $74,000. We had to break it out that way because only the portion associated with the airfield was eligible for FAA funding. And then the ancillary improvements, $1.7 million for a total of $5.9 million. So in terms of how this is being funded, we'll start with the terminal building. Right now, you have a grant from the South Carolina Aeronautics Commission of $500,000, which leaves the balance with Lancaster County. That's what we're going after with that airport terminal program grant. So hopefully we'll be successful there. And what will happen is we'll have to, the state will, their rule is this, they'll participate in 50% of the non-federal share up to $500,000. So if we end up with federal coming in here and picking up that 3.3, then their share will only be 50% of the non-federal share. So that $500,000 will go down, but so will Lancaster County's. Both will significantly be reduced if we're successful with the ATP grant. Stop me if you have any questions as I'm going along. The lighting vault and associated site work, that's being funded by several sources. We're using AIP, that stands for Airport Improvement Program. That's your $150,000 that you have from 2022. We got discretionary for that as well, and that was $316,000, which leaves 5% from the state and 5% from Lancaster County, which is almost $26,000. Emergency generator for the airfield is AIP discretionary, $47,000, with 5% from the Aeronautics Commission, 5% from Lancaster County, which is about $2,600. Emergency generator is not eligible for FAA funding or state funding. So that's Lancaster County. And then with the ancillary improvements, you remember you get $159,000 a year for 5 years. And so that money is going to offset the ancillary improvements, leaving the county share at $1.5 million. So that's the funding breakdown based on all the grants we received in 2022. Any questions about that split? So the county share, total share is 4.7, and I'm going to show you in a minute what we're doing with the capital improvement plans, 5 years. We're showing that you're reimbursing yourself with the annual BIL, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, annual allocation per year. The state matches that at 5%. So if you look at that note in green, over the years, you will accumulate $671,000. You'll reimburse yourself for federal fiscal 23, 24, 25, and 26. That is, 26 is the year that the bipartisan infrastructure law expires. So it really brings down your total investment to $4 million. As I said, if we got the ATP grant, it would reduce that down to about $700,000. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see our CIP. Unfortunately, this is the FAA's layout of the spreadsheet, and they basically told all the airports, if you don't use this, then you won't get funding. So we have to use this form with all kind of information in there that they use to consider projects. And this is a requirement. I've been before this body for years. Every year around this time, the FAA requires you update your 5-year CIP, capital improvement plan, and this is for federal fiscal 24 through federal fiscal 28. 23 is being shown up there just for reference so that they see we're going to reimburse ourselves. So we're in federal fiscal 23. We're going to submit a grant application for that, for your annual allocation of your bill money, as well as the 5% match to the state sometime very soon. So you'll begin reimbursing yourself this year. What it also shows up there is for 23, 24, 25, we're banking your non-primary entitlement funds, which are AIP, Airport Improvement Program. You get $150,000 a year. And you can use that for a hangar project. So we're banking that money to offset the total cost of the hangar. We're showing about $2 million is the estimate for the construction of the hangar. That's rough order of magnitude right now, because steel there's a lot of things that are moving around out there, but it's at least a placeholder. We're showing that in 27, thinking that may be when you'll have enough money accumulated in your sales tax 3 program. That hangar project, just as a reminder, was number 4 on the sales tax 3 program in terms of priority. But I've been told that the first project was bonded, so we might be number 4 in terms of sales tax collection. Not quite sure when that's going to occur, but we think that's a pretty good date as we get closer with our projections on your sales tax collection. We may adjust that, but for right now, that's the best we know at this point in time. So what you're seeing up there in 26 is we're using some of the non-primary entitlement money, that AIP money, that $150,000 a year, to fund the design of the hangar in 26, and then to bid the project and then go for a grant for construction in 27. And that really kind of sums up what your CIP, what we're proposing, and this is due to the FAA on December the 2nd or before. So we just need to make sure we've done our due diligence locally before we submit it to the FAA.
Well, Mr. Holt, I personally thank you for all you've done for us at that airport. Had it not been for you, we would not have a Class A runway, lights, the whole ball of wax, fencing, and this sort of thing to keep out these varmints that jump over fences and get on our runways. So thank you so much for all you've done for Lancaster County's airport. I appreciate it very much. I won't be here much longer, but I still plan to follow it, and I hope one day to see a new terminal and new places to put hangars to put airplanes in it out there, and I hope we run out of room and we have to start buying other property. So thank you very much.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and we appreciate it on behalf of our company to have this opportunity, but I will have to say that everything I do is what this guy right here tells me to do. So he's the man behind the curtain, I guess you'd say, or with strings. But anyway, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, all right, thank y'all.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's move on down to our citizens' comments. Please bear in mind, this is not a period of dialogue with council or question and answer period. This is your opportunity to address council with your concerns. I ask that you address your remarks to council as a body and not to any individual council member. Please speak into the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to address council. Your time will not start until you have provided your name and address. We have Mr. Gordon Johnston.
Council members, staff, good evening. Gordon Johnston, address is 7401 Carmel Executive Park Drive in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm here representing Century Communities tonight for the rezoning of approximately 20 acres on Shiloh Unity Road. It's item 8A on your agenda. Tonight's the third reading for this rezoning, and we don't have a whole lot new to update you all on from where we were 2 weeks ago when we were here in front of you. However, I did want to add that in, I guess you'd call it a parallel path on this project, we've been pursuing the preliminary plan review and approval for the overall project that this 20 acres is a part of. And happy to report that that preliminary plan was approved by Planning Commission last Tuesday night. I mentioned that as I believe it offers good evidence and the positive strides we're making on not only the project, but also the reception that we're getting from the community for the project and the vision that we're trying to create, at least as it's translated by the Planning Commission's vote of approval. So that's all I have to offer for updates, and I am here tonight and available for any questions when the item comes out. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. That concludes our citizens' comments today. So we will go on down to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve consent agenda items 7A and 7B.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Mostello, a second from Ms. McGriff. Let's have a roll call for approval.
Terry Graham,
Approve.
Charlene McGriff, Billy Mostello,
Approve.
Larry Honeycutt,
Approve.
Steve Harper,
Approve.
Alan Blackman,
Approve.
Brian Carnes.
Approve.
All right, thank you. Let's go on down to item 8A. This is one I have to recuse myself from. I have a vested interest in this property. Mr. Carnes?
Okay, let's look at item 8A. It's an application by Century Communities to rezone 3 parcels totaling 19.93 acres located at Williamson Farm and at 500 and 516 West Shiloh Unity Road. It's being asked to be rezoned from low-density residential to medium-density residential. Do we have a motion?
Approve. So move, approve. Whatever.
Second.
So move to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Honeycutt and a second by Ms. McGriff. Is there any discussion?
I got some comments. This is MDR, which is eligible for cluster development. I believe the ordinance we have for cluster development in Lancaster County is not really a very good ordinance at all. We just have to look across the state line and you'll see some higher density that are cluster development. Our cluster development does neither allow the development to blend into the surrounding area, nor does it preserve the natural beauty of that area. It's not cluster development. It's just a blob of big houses, as the chairman remarked about a certain development in the Panhandle.
Do we have anyone else who'd like to comment? If not, can we have a roll call vote?
Terry Graham,
No.
Charlene McGriff,
Yes.
Billy Mostello,
Yes.
Larry Honeycutt,
Yes.
Steve Harper abstains, Alan Blackman,
Yes.
Brian Carnes.
No. Okay, by a vote to 4-2, the third reading has been approved.
All right, let's move on down to 8B, we have a public hearing, second reading of ordinance 2022-1825 regarding approval of bonds for the Roslyn Residential Improvement District. Mr. DeBose.
Mr. Chair, members of council, there have been no changes substantively to the ordinance from last reading. Some of the exhibits that had errors on the first go-around have been reattached. I believe an improper assessment roll had been attached on first reading. By way of reminder, as far as some of the factual background, as of the first reading, Lennard spent $30 million towards land development activity in phase 1 and 2 of this development, including some common area cost. Of that amount, approximately $20 million was associated with planning, engineering, permitting, and construction with the public infrastructure within these phases, which would be eligible within this defined Series 2022 project. According to the engineer's report, the estimated total cost on infrastructure included within that Series 2022 project is about $50 million. If there are any technical questions concerning the bond ordinance, bond counsel Michael Seasons here for county, and Lennar is present as well with their counsel, Joe Lucas.
Anyone have?
John, one question.
Go ahead.
Who is the engineer? Who retained the engineer that gave the report?
I believe Lennar retained the engineer on this project, Councilman Blackman.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Graham.
Generally, I don't support residential improvement districts, but in this case, I recognize that Lennar has spent substantial amounts of money on the infrastructure. I also think this particular development will be a great asset to Lancaster County as a whole, and it moves the development south of 5 and gives some relief to the development in Indian land, and it spreads the growth further south.
All right, thank you, Mr. Graham. Any more comments before we vote? Hearing none. Oh, well, we got to have a motion to bring this thing. I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor. I'm sorry. Motion from Mr. Mosteller, second from Ms. McGriff. I apologize.
We have a public hearing as well.
Public hearing.
Okay. All right, let's do the public hearing first. No one signed up for this. Would anyone like to speak on it? Seeing no one wants to speak, I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor. Mr. Mosteller, a second from Ms. McGriff. Any discussion? We'll call for the roll call vote.
Terry Graham,
Yes.
Charlene McGriff,
Yes.
Billy Mosteller,
Yes.
Larry Honeycutt,
Yes.
Steve Parker,
Yes.
Alan Blackman,
Yes.
Brian
Jerry, do you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we have unanimous approval of second reading of ordinance 2022-1825. Let's go on down to 8C, public hearing and second reading of ordinance 2022-1829 regarding removal of property from the Roslyn Residential Improvement District. Mr. DeBose.
Mr. Chair, members of council, as discussed last time, in connection with a contemplated fire district associated with the Roslyn community, it was discovered that approximately 50 acres were included in the residential improvement district that should not have been. This ordinance merely corrects the acreage description and the boundaries of the residential improvement district by removing that acreage.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. DeBose? Hearing none, we do have a public hearing scheduled on this. No one signed up, so we'll move past our public hearing, and I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to...
Motion to approve.
Motion from Mr.
Second.
Barnes, second from Mr. Graham. Any discussion? We'll call for the roll call vote.
Terry Graham,
Yes.
Charlene McGriff,
Yes.
Billy Mosteller,
Yes.
Larry Honeycutt,
Yes.
Steve Parker,
Yes.
Alan Blackman,
Yes.
Brian Carnes.
Yes.
All right, we have unanimous approval of the second read of orders 2022-1829. Let's go down to 8D, first reading of orders 2022-1830 regarding amending Chapter 7 of the County Code to adopt the updated Uniform Building Codes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Ms. McGriff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Carnes. Mr. DeBose, Mr. Robinson.
Chairman and council, this is the typical three-year cycle renewal of ordinance to adopt the uniform codes and the permissive codes with the state's modifications that's set through the South Carolina Building Codes Council and mandated by the state. To give you a little quick background of a timeline and how we got here, the 2021 codes were approved by the ICC. The ICC is the governing body that writes the codes nationwide. That occurred in late 2019, and the ICC codes were published in mid-2020. They were adopted by the South Carolina Building Codes Council on October 6th of last year with the intent of implementation on January 1st of 2023. This is fairly typical, and the 2021 South Carolina modifications to the code were published in the State Register on May 27th of this year, spring of this year. A little further background, there are over 200 actual code changes across all the disciplines of the codes. That's 13 code disciplines that we're adopting here as set into ordinance. As you see, the commercial building, residential 1 and 2 family, fire code, plumbing, mechanical, fuel gas, the NEC, and it also includes the accessibility standard, the energy code, and then the permissive codes. So how do we make this known to contractors, homeowners, and such? It's a learning curve. It always is for both contractors, the inspectors, ourselves, homeowners. We've been publishing it and making it known, advertising through the office, through the website since about August of this year, past several months. Inspectors have been going through training. We've had 4 inspectors so far who went through the training. I was in it week before last, myself with 2 of those inspectors. And again, 2 more dates in December. This is 2 days of training. As you can see, there's no way to go through that quickly with over 200 code changes across all the different disciplines. And then the upcoming, like I said, trainings in December. So to go over a few of the major code changes. Hard to do it, like I say, without 2 days. So I put together 12 to 15 residential code changes that seem to be predominant in this cycle. Not to go over each one of those you see unless you wish to remark on them. But a few that stand out among those, any alteration or remodel job will now require carbon monoxide alarms wherever there's fuel-fired systems such as furnaces found in a home. That was a pretty big change. One of the major changes is an upgrade from a 6 mil poly vapor barrier to now a 10 mil Class A vapor barrier. Oddly enough, not required on a vented crawl space, but it is required under slabs. And South Carolina LLR modified that to include garages now. This is a very heavy poly vapor barrier that's even puncture resistant.
The emergency escape, what is the 36 3 O's required, 2.8, is that the width?
That is
Or
actually,
is that the,
that's not actually the window size. That is once you get out of the window, which is your bedroom fire escape, that's a clear path basically to the street.
oh, okay.
Couldn't put say a condensing unit under that window, things of that nature, so that once you
Your
get out
window
of the
size
window.
is staying the same.
That's correct. That's correct. The size stays the
Okay.
same. 5 square foot of open window on first floor, 5.7 square feet on
Okay.
any second floor. One thing also, garage doors now do have to be labeled for wind resistance.
Is that new, Darren?
That is new.
Well, the new ones, the manufacturers, do they have that already?
They do. It's in design. It now is particular to the label.
Okay, so it should be on any new
That's,
install.
that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Moving to the next page. One major item here is hot water piping, 100-foot maximum from the water heater, unless you have a recirculating system. To take a step back, this is a pretty big change too. Range vents over 400 cubic feet now will require makeup air. Typical range vents are anywhere from 600 to 2,000 cubic feet per minute, so this is a pretty big change. And probably the biggest of all is an electrical change to require a service disconnect now in any location outdoors. And it has to be marked as an emergency disconnect, service disconnect. It has to be marked and labeled as an emergency disconnect. You're probably going to see most contractors and such use a combination panel so that main breaker, and this is coming from fire department, was the major proponent of that code change. Yeah, so they won't pull a meter anymore now. They can actually have that disconnect readily available to find. And then lastly, South Carolina did this year mandatory adoption of a few appendices, one of which is Appendix Q for tiny houses. It defines tiny house as 400 square feet or less. It's a very brief and short appendix, and basically what it does is relaxes some of the regular code requirements found in the code itself. For example, ceiling heights. Instead of a 7-foot regular ceiling height for habitable spaces, it can be 6'8" in a bathroom or kitchen, and it can even come down to 6'4" for your ceiling height in a tiny house. Yeah.
No too many tall people walking in there.
I don't know if you'll fit in that, Steve.
Instead of another way, it relaxes the code there and gives some availability to perform that is conventional stairs would not be required. You could use a ship's ladder with 12 inches wide with the rungs, just like a typical ladder, rungs 10 to 14 inches apart. So it gives you those type of accommodations for tiny houses. Now, tiny
Darren,
houses.
exactly what is surge protection? I know that's new. What does that entail?
Surge protection, where you get basically a utility surge, that is required in the code as a code change, but South Carolina LLR deleted that. So it will not be required for us.
Is that going to be the responsibility of the homeowner or the provider?
That would be the responsibility of the homeowner, but like I said, it is deleted to be eliminated from any code requirement by South Carolina LLR.
There's a lot of codes. Boy,
A lot of codes.
I don't know how anybody would still ever think about building their own house.
Hot off the press, I mean, this is the International Residential Code, and it's 1,000 pages.
And just, I get the way this works, this is adopted January the 1st, and any permits before that date, anything now, will be completed under the current code. So they can't change in midstream and make you go back and do something different.
It's effective January 1st.
Anything, yeah.
It's mandated by state, effective January 1st. I will, oddly enough, the 2024 codes will probably get approved by ICC, which is the governing body that writes the codes, in early 2023 and be published next year. The state of South Carolina kind of lags behind 2 years in that adoption. You know, after it goes through code change reviews, development hearings, public hearings. That's basically the process on both the ICC and the state's side. And a little bit of other information. There's probably a tendency that legislation will come back up as proposed by the Home Builders Association of South Carolina to take the residential code cycle to a 6-year cycle. The Home Builders Association is a big proponent for that 6-year cycle.
Well, I got an old house, and I can tell you I won't be remodeling anytime soon.
And like you say, you can see the codes that they're unchanged between the permissive codes and the uniform codes that we're here to adopt as regulated by the.
And if any councilman wants to look through these codes, you'll be you'll set them up in the office and
yeah, we'll have a training session.
Let you
need to
look at them all you want.
We'll let you read them first.
I just want to give a shout out. Several years ago, the county adopted what we call the Evolve software for all kind of development, but it also for the builders. Me being a small builder, you go online, you get you schedule your inspection. If you get turned down, it notifies your subs immediately. So it works great. And,
it is.
We
it's
appreciate
been excellent. We started in July of 2019.
And we have a very professional building department. We're lucky to have the, I guess, inspectors that we do.
I think that's good, but I wish you could work out some with the Barn Brothers to help their issue, because they got a really compelling story. The barn.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Robinson?
All I have.
Anybody else? Anyone have any questions? Thank you. And this is something that's mandatory that every 2 years we have to adopt them, whether we agree with all of them or not.
Every 3 years, so we'll be doing the same thing again around this time in 2025.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none, we'll call for a roll call vote.
Terry Graham.
Yes.
Troy McGriff.
Yes.
Billy Mosteller.
Yes.
Larry Honeycutt.
Yes.
Steve Harper.
Yes.
Alan Blackman.
Yes.
Brian Carnes.
Yes.
All right, we have a unanimous approval of first reading of ordinance 2022-1830. Let's go down to item 9, our discussion and action items, approval of our appointment to the Fire Commission, Mr. Anthony T. White from Gooch's Fire Department.
Mr. Chairman, that's my district. I motion to approve.
Motion from Mr. Honeycutt, second from Mr. Mosteller. Let's call for a roll call vote, please.
Terry Graham.
Yes.
Charlie McGriff.
Yes.
Billy Mosteller.
Yes.
Larry Honeycutt.
Yes.
Steve Harper.
Yes.
Alan Blackman.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, we have unanimous approval and welcome Mr. White to the Fire Commission. Is there, Mr. Marstall, is there anything else?
No, sir.
All right, Mr. Honeycutt, it's 7:01. Can I, 7:02?
Mr. Chairman,
Can
I make a motion, we adjourn these proceedings.
Have a motion for Mr. Honeycutt. Do I have a second, please? To have a-
I'm going to second it. I'm going to second it. We can get out of here.
For Mr. Graham, let's have a roll call vote to adjourn.
Terry Graham,
Yes.
Charlie McGrath,
Yes.
Billy Mosteller,
Yes.
Terry Honeycutt,
Yes.
Steve Parker,
Yes.
Alan Blackman,
Yes.
Brian Carn.
Yes.
We have unanimous approval to adjourn. This meeting is now adjourned.